All right, everybody, welcome to another Side Dive with your host today, Rex. This is actually going to be my first side dive so far. Sorry about the delay. I'm actually having a little bit of troubles getting the recording aspect down on my end, so more to come for that, hopefully. But today's episode, I am calling it The Good, the Bad, and the Internet. I got a lot to talk about this, okay? It's been on my mind lately, especially with all these new games, new movies. Actually, all forms of media and opinion are just under fire. Rightly so. It's the internet. It's never been a kind place. But let's kind of talk more about what's going on. And my problem is how it's affected our media these days. And you know, obviously aspects of people's thinking and all that stuff these days, but I'm going to keep this internet conversation contained to kind of what me and Practical talk about, which is multimedia and how the internet actually affects the way it's made these days. And to first start off, I think there's a good and a bad to fan interaction and involvement when developing movies, scripts, video games, music. You want to keep, some thought of your fans in mind, but at the same time, I feel it kind of can help negate the natural inspiration and imagination you have when you're creating these things. For music, a lot of people prefer your older stuff. A lot of people prefer your newer stuff. Some people don't care either way. They just love you put something out. But there's always such a strong negative voice about everything that it makes creators kind of stop in their shoes and kind of think about what they're doing more instead of letting this kind of organic creativity come to mind. Everybody's on eggshells pretty much on the internet when you're famous and you have a platform, because any small move, any wrong move, it gets analyzed, broken down to levels that you didn't even think it could be. Wearing different shoes on a certain day could end up changing the narrative of something for your life. But it's super apparent in our video game industry. There's so much, and I hate to use the word, misinformation out there, but it's true. The video game industry is such a bad example of this, because people will just say a game or something like that is not good, trash, is just bad, and they've never played it because they're rolling off somebody else saying that, who may have a jaded opinion because they don't like, for example, right now, our Star Wars Outlaw game is, come under fire. It is a Ubisoft game. That is a fair thing to stand on, because we all know Ubisoft is kind of a machine that pumps out some cookie cutter stuff. They have great hits and great stuff in their backlog, and some of their recent stuff is really good. But in general, a Ubisoft title comes with these, bloated open worlds, stuff like that. But that doesn't always mean it's a bad game. And I feel right now this game is under fire on the internet due to the publisher being Ubisoft. So obviously, people think it's going to be bland, it's going to be bloated, it's going to be boring. And a lot of people will just assume these things and run with it. They'll tell you it. They'll do all that while never playing more than an hour of the game. And it's true with a lot of things, with movies, with music. Linkin Park, I want to shout out, has a new singer. That's going to be tough for her to navigate the internet. Just the shoes she's stepping into, people's violent opinions on music, and, especially, not especially, but Linkin Park fans are real diehard Hybrid Theory fans, honestly. And, we're throwing a girl into the mix, and I just don't see the internet being too kind. Again, it never has been, but to stuff like this, people take such a passionate approach and kind of an angry approach on the internet, and I suffer it myself. I get pulled into these like petty conversations on Facebook, commenting about stuff or thinking something's dumb. So I'm not above it. I'm literally a product of it, and I'm not proud of it, but I do it. And a lot of us do, and we voice our opinions sometimes a little harshly, a little overzealous, and that can just have a lot of backlash these days in the community, because it's not always about what's right. It's about who's the loudest and who's making the most noise about it. So if you have a game like Outlaws or, Starfield, like we talked about on our last podcast, any of those things, once it comes under fire, a lot of times the bad always outweighs the good. People with Outlaws, it's not a game to reinvent the wheel in open world games, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game. Starfield did the same. It wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel as far as Bethesda games go, but it still just didn't hit its mark. But the games are mercilessly torn apart, and by a good decent of the crowd who's never played it, or like I said, played maybe an hour of it, made their decision and, tossed it aside. I've done it again. These are all things I'm guilty of too. I've watched part of a movie or a TV show and I scoff it off and don't think anything of it and don't talk good about it, but I never finish it. And that's something we all got to get better at. But the internet just is a way where you can voice these opinions without any repercussion. Because if someone says something you don't like, you don't respond, or you just can revert to, being a child and making fun of each other, which sometimes is fun. Not going to lie. But it's affecting what we do on the internet to our media and our outlet sources and how they are, brought out to us. Practical mentioned, moviegoers, kind of like the convenience these days of sitting at home. I feel that's part of kind of the culture of the internet, hating on movie theaters so much, especially after COVID came, they came out. The few movie theaters that did survive, had to up their prices to keep going. And although it is ridiculous, $17, $20 for a popcorn and a soda, but that's how we keep the cinema alive. But with the internet bashing it so badly, what can the theater do to appease both? So streaming's now around. Streaming's a huge thing. It's got a litany of just issues with everything, and it's affected originality. It's affected, in my opinion, developers and writers, directors from taking that extra step outside of their box, like trying something, pushing a boundary or doing something like that, because the backlash and the hate that you can receive for not kind of treading normal waters, familiar waters, is a scary thing to do. And I think that hinders it, because if you make a movie too outside of what's accepted with your fan base, it's going to get torn apart on the internet. And they'll do this whole thing that's now become a problem with the internet, I think, is review bombing. I don't think if there's a thing you don't like about a game that you should review bomb it. If you just don't like the game for whatever reason, and again, not playing it or stuff, you review bomb it. I think there's other ways to go about it. Your wallet. Don't spend the money on that stuff. Don't pay the streaming services. Go to the movie theaters, all that kind of stuff. But the point being is the internet has this profound effect on all our lives now. And I'm old enough to have lived in the time when the internet was still coming up, where it took, it said on there 10 years to download 2 songs from LimeWire or something like that, So back then the internet wasn't what it is. It was, I want to say, a nicer place, because I remember being a kid and being in the Yahoo chats. I don't know if any of you did that out there. Shout out to Yahoo chats. But I spent hours in there talking to people I never knew. I can't even tell you what we talked about. But, it was a different time in the internet. But once it started to evolve and become this super informational concept that people can just go on, find out all they want to know, all they need to know about, movies, music, whatever. And then it opened up a place for you to put your opinion. And truthfully, the people with the most negative opinion are the ones more likely to comment or, talk about it. On the other hand, the good about the internet is the exposure. Like for bands and stuff like that, the internet was a kind of a revolution for them. It was kind of a double-sided blade kind of thing. The internet made it so possible for you to reach a bigger audience, you know, get more people onto your stuff. And honestly, it's what helped skyrocket the emo and screamo scene. MySpace, without MySpace and that being, and the internet being a part of it, that genre may have never made it off the ground. It would have died where it stood. So it has good stuff, and the bad about it is now, I mean, it depends on how you look at it musically wise, but to me, I feel that now that we have such access to the internet and access to this stuff, there's such a flood of artists and all this stuff that it's hard to really find really great artists, I guess you could say. You know, there's a lot of people out there putting out music, and shout out to them. They're better than me. They're braver than me. But not everything and not everybody can do it. Not everything is good music, and just because you can make it doesn't mean it's good. Not everybody's musically inclined. And that's just kind of the long and short of that. But like with movies, I feel it's taken a giant toll. I feel like we're in such a nostalgia just circle box that we can't get out of right now, and that's because of the internet. The internet is superiorly nostalgic. They hold, everybody on the internet holds what they loved as a kid or as a younger person, you know. They hold that close to their heart, and they hold on to it hard. And if you deviate from what they believe or what they think should have been done, you just get torn apart. And like I said, it just makes it hard for a director or a musician or a game designer, you know, to really want to take those steps outside the box and be creative. Well, and I think part of it is how we ended up with these cookie cutter games like Call of Duty. It's almost the same game repeated every single year, but millions and millions of people buy it and play it all the time. And the internet, everybody loved it. It's a big thing. And even if it's not loved, if you hate it, it's still popular. So even though all these people are hating on Outlaws, you know, they say no, or bad press is good press. So it's another double-edged sword with all this stuff with the internet. Like, it's a great place and it can be a bad place. I just feel that its impact on our media and our views of how it should be done and what should be done are out of control. And especially the kind of mystery of a movie is gone now. They basically teach you, or not teach you, but tell you every step of the way of the development process, almost like, hey, we're doing this, we've done this, we're changing this, you know. And there's so much they're telling you and showing you that it takes away the mystery and the, you know, the wonder and the curiosity to go see this movie. And then the trailer, don't even get me started on trailers these days. But again, it's another outlet that has diminished the curiosity out of us. And that's what the internet's done to movies. You know, people nowadays judge movies solely off the director, the casting, you know, and they don't know anything else. They just know that was picked. And so they're done with it. They have no curiosity. When I was a kid, we had, you know, there was trailers obviously on TV and stuff. You'd see them, but they weren't 4.5 minute trailers showing you every story beat that movie has. They were shorter, got to the point, and they made you kind of excited. I remember being excited watching commercials. The Spider-Man 2 trailer, I can't even tell you how many times I watched that on repeat because it was so cool. I wanted to see it so bad. I wanted to know what happens. But if it came out today, I probably would have known the whole entire movie. Probably would have known Doc Ock sacrifices himself. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Spider-Man 2, your fault. But that's just my opinions on the internet. And let me know what you guys think about the internet, because it's a great place. It's wonderful. I love all the information. You know, we all spend so much time on it with gaming, looking stuff up. I get so lost in rabbit holes about, you know, bands and movies and conspiracy theories, especially. You know, I go down a crazy rabbit hole with them, but it has its good and its bad. But in my opinion, man, I give it a 2 out of 10. That's my rating on the internet. It's got its place. It's got a good spot in our growth as humans, but I think it just actually it hinders us more than it helps. We've become so strong in our opinions without retaliation or without consequence that we say these outlandish things and make such rash decisions and then fight about it like we're right. It's just an interesting dynamic that has changed with the internet and with all our media and everything with it. The dynamics have changed with that, and I feel partly the internet is why we're in, like I said, this nostalgia box of if it doesn't throw back to the old movies, or if this music doesn't kind of have the feel of this old album, or this game, isn't a good sequel. It all kind of comes down to that. The internet has changed the way people are creative, and they have that phrase that the pen is mightier than the sword, and the internet has proved that time and time again. If you guys, before I end this, just to prove my point and point it out, the internet changed the design of Sonic in the first Sonic movie. I'm not here defending the design choice. The Sonic didn't look that great. But a long time ago, that choice would have been made, and that's the choice they're making. And you either dealt with it and watched the movie and liked it, or you didn't, and you let that be a point of contention. But bullying stuff like that on the internet, especially to creative people and stuff like that, I just feel is not good to push forward stuff like movies and games too. Music also. It just hinders it, and it makes you more careful about what you create and what you put out there, and you're more choosy. So, the inspiration, the awe and all this stuff is almost being snuffed out. And I can't say it's only the internet's fault. We're all people. We make decisions ourselves, but it's these choices we make on the internet, these petty arguments and these rash decisions and hatefulness about certain things because one character wasn't in your movie is just asinine. And again, I say this all and I do it myself. So it's a vicious circle and we're all stuck in it. I'm stuck in it, but I just wish there was a better way. Again, 2 out of 10 for the internet. Let me know what you guys think about all this. Do you think the internet has made media better? Do you think that without it, some of the biggest artists these days wouldn't be around and they wouldn't have got their fair shot? Let me know. I'm curious to hear all this, but currently, I love the internet, but it's a 2 out of 10. I think it's spiraled our media into just a bad direction. Nothing that we can't ever recover from, but something we need to think about. And that kind of wraps it up for me, guys. I want to thank you for joining me on my first side dive. I know it was a real long rant about the internet, but it needed to be said. And with that, have a great rest of your day, guys. Take care.